Welcome to Far East Wargaming, bringing you another Heresy Thursday. My name is Richard, your host, and once again joining us is Jason.
Hello everyone, glad to be here again.
This week we're talking about something exciting, one of the latest releases for the Horus Heresy, and something we've thought was in the pipeline for a while, but glad it's finally here.
Oh, I'm so excited about this particular release. Probably the most excited I have been out of any of the boxes, with the exception maybe the Mark III box. I thought that was a really good battle force. But it's the AdMech. We get the Mechanicum battle group in plastic. It's finally here. AdMech fans rejoice, tech thralls rejoice, everybody rejoice. It's here in plastic.
Yes, so we are getting the Mechanicum battle group. That's what they've named it, very much like the Solar Auxilia battle group or the Legion Astartes battle group. And it's following a very similar structure to it. It's got 20 infantry, some elites, or in this case they're actually troops as well, but some troops, and then a large vehicle. And let's dive into it.
Yeah, this is a really good set, right? It's one of those sets that everything is useful, unlike the Solar Aux with the whatever the tank was in the Solar Aux. It's escaping me at the moment, but everything in this box is really, really good. Yes, the Thralls and the Thalax are line, but the Triaros conveyor is really, really useful in an AdMech army because you can do things like the Thralls in it, or you could put the Myrmidons in it. The Castellax, absolutely useful. This is the one box set that I would say everything is really good. Although the Mark III box was probably the same. But yes, this is just a really, really good set.
Yeah, we're comparing vehicles, and it's the Dracasan for the Solar Orcs. But you're right, I think the main difference here is this one is going to get a lot more utility out of it. And if you're buying multiple sets, which I think if you are collecting any of these legions, you're taking advantage of the price drop between in this box set here. But having both of two tanks, two of these vehicles, they'll get use as opposed to the Solar Orcs, or even actually the Space Marines, where you're not needing two Land Raiders or two Spartans from Age of Darkness.
Yeah, there's some armies that could definitely use those tanks, but this one is definitely usable everything. I mean, the Tyros is a very powerful vehicle. It's basically the equivalent of a Land Raider. It has front armor 14. It does have armor 12 on the sides, but it does have a flare shield, so it's effectively armor 15 on the front. It's very useful for keeping your thralls alive to get them on objectives, or delivering Myrmidons in somebody's face. So that is a very, very good tank. And when it was Forgeworld only, and when it was in resin, you just didn't see it very often because, number one, it was super expensive. It was like 120 pounds. But number two, it was just a massive hunk of resin, very big, very heavy, very fiddly to put together. So yeah, that tank in plastic is excellent, and I think it's also a good sign of things to come on the other tanks from the Mechanicum as well.
Yeah, the original tank, which we see here, was 121 pounds. Still available from Games Workshop for the time being. I don't think it'll be available long. A lot of these resin ones are no longer in stock. But if we compare the two, they've been pretty faithful between the conversion from resin to the conversion to plastic. There are a few tweaks, and honestly, they're minor in my opinion. You'd have to really delve into it to notice. And just having access to plastic models is fantastic there.
Yeah, there's a couple other things that stick out on that tank to me as well. If you actually look at the side detail, it does seem like it's perhaps a little bit more crisp, or a little bit more detail of that kind of the mechanical gears and pipes and whatnot on the sides. That sticks out to me a lot. What also sticks out to me is the decals, right? Because that is a decal set that I'm not sure that we've ever seen before, and that probably means that we're getting a decal sheet as part of this box set. So yeah, I mean, that one's a win for me, honestly. Really, really like this, and love the fact that it's in plastic now.
Yeah. Yet to see what the sprues look like, because we've had some vehicles which are really nice to assemble, and some vehicles we're glad they're in plastic, but they're still a nightmare. But only time will tell when we actually get our hands on one of these boxes. And I'm guessing, Jason, as you are a prolific 30k hoarder, you're going to be getting at least one of these.
I've already put in my order for two. I do have a Mechanicum Force already in various stages of completion that I've picked up through various deals and whatnot. But that's not going to stop me from getting these because actually the Tech Thralls, I do have 20 of the originals in resin, but these things are so cheap points wise. You want a ton of them anyhow. And the Triaros I don't have, so that one's a big win for me. And Castellax, this is awesome because you get the saw blade hands, which has always been a very popular version of the Castellax. I'm not sure what weapon options will be available. I'm assuming all of them will be available for this. So yes, two boxes are definitely on order for me, and it will definitely flesh out what I already have quite nicely.
Yes, so for the Castellax, they've got the saw blades and the bolter options. They've also got the multi-melter. The bolt cannon is the one I think you get. And it's the Sinister Dark Fire Cannon. And I'm not sure why it says Dark Light Cannon here. I would assume that Games Workshop would get their naming right in their releases. Unless this is a new weapon we don't know about.
Yeah, it could be a typo. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen a typo on various publications from Games Workshop, but the Darkfire Cannon used to be the go-to meta choice in 1.0. It's not really as strong as it used to be. Multi-meltas are always useful, especially when with the twin linking and whatnot. But even the Mauler bolt cannon, if you're just trying to go cheap and cheerful, is not bad. But I think that one got toned down a little bit too. I'm actually looking at my book right now just to remember. Uh, let's see. Let me just check real quick. Mauler bolt cannon. Yeah, it's AP4. I think it used to be AP3 if I remember correctly, but it does pin. So yes, I mean, again, the Castellax models are going to be very useful. Everybody's going to have at least probably 4 to 6 of these things in their lists, depending on which version of Mechanicum that you play. But the fact that you get all the weapon options, hopefully, in one box and the yummy yummy saw blade hands, that makes me happy.
The one thing you aren't getting, which they did preview, is the Thanatar. And that big boy is not part of this box set, which is a bit disappointing, to be honest. Including one would have really rounded off this box quite nicely.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. The Thanatar is everybody's favorite. I mean, who doesn't love the double firing plasma mortar that it has, or the absolutely nasty las cannon, Solax las cannon, whatever they call that thing. Um, I guess you probably could have switched out maybe the Triaros for a Thanatar, but again, I mean, either one of those is going to be useful. But yes, I mean, it would have been nice to have, but I can definitely see them releasing that as a separate box, and it's probably going to be similar priced if I had to guess to a Knight, and that may be why they didn't put it in this box because I'm sure that it's I don't know if it's price parity with the prior oath or not, but it would have been good to have. I agree.
I'm not too versed on the Mechanicum, but isn't this more Leviathan-esque if you compare it to the Astartes?
In what way? I'm sorry.
Well, the in terms of size and where it sits in the army, the Thanatar.
Yeah, it's actually bigger.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's taller, so I mean, it's. I think it might even be on a bigger base than a Leviathan, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, the Thanatar is big. It's really really tall. The fact that that's coming out in plastic. I mean, any of the mechanical stuff coming out in plastic is going to be amazing because they're just solid hunks of resin, but a lot of it is also prone to breaking. But yes, a Thanatar is really, really big in comparison to a Leviathan.
Ah, fair enough. So scale-wise, it is on the larger side. They also previewed a new, well, HQ model here, an Archmagos Prime, with I think that looks like a conversion beamer, a Volkite Suspender on an arm, and some sort of staff. I think they call this the Corpusant Stave here. And looks like a nice model, but again, it's another monopose, no weapon option model, it looks like.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I like the model a lot. I think it looks really, really good. It looks almost like, to me, a cross between a lot of the 40K Mechanicum HQ models and the previous 30K ones in terms of the styling and the robe, the way the robe flows and this kind of thing. It'll be good to see. I fingers crossed if there's other weapon options, but the weapons that it comes with are not bad. A conversion beamer, if this is the same one as you would see on a contemptor, I mean, who doesn't love a potential strength 12 small blast AP1? That could be just nasty versus vehicles, and then he's got that bulk height on there as well. The corpuscent staff, excuse me. Um, yeah, it's great again in combat against walkers and vehicles, but not against much else. But I'm sure that you could just run this as some other type of weapon if you really wanted to. But yeah, I do like that model. That one's really, really nice. It's got the classic pointing hand. Who doesn't love a pointing hand?
Yes, and speaking of 40k parallels there, we don't play 40k on the channel, but I try and follow what I can, and I didn't realize that a lot of this stuff has been put to rest in 40k, so this box probably won't be usable by our 40k brothers.
No, that's a fair point. Although I could see somebody taking um, the thralls' bodies and throwing on like Atari weapons and heads, depending on how the heads come on these, and that would be a nice little variant Skitarii model. The capsule axe, it's essentially the same size as the what's that one called in 40k? I can't remember off the top of my head, but the 40k equivalent, which looks a little bit cartoony and bubbly in my opinion. Um, I think you could probably get away with using those, but you're absolutely right. The Thalax is not going to be applicable for 40k, and the Tyros is not going to be applicable as well. So maybe only about half of this box could you convert over and use in 40k. But I mean, if your game group doesn't care about these kinds of things, I'm sure you can do a lot of this. It counts as anyhow.
Yeah. The Triaros there in plastic is also maybe a small indicator that one of the other, I think, more combat focused vehicles will come out in plastic again, because I think they share a lot of similarities in terms of the chassis. I think it's the Kraknos that uses a very similar chassis but has a larger weapon contingent there. And I think that's already out of stock in the Games Workshop web store.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as well. The styling on the Kraknos and the styling on the other smaller tanks. Um, there are some differences. The Kraknos is the closest one to the Triaros. Maybe they're going to do something with this set if you think about the way they made the Spartan and the Land Raider share a lot of the same parts in plastic, which is pretty smart, makes a lot of sense. So I would be surprised if this particular kit couldn't come out with a Kraknos variant with a different sprue. And maybe, just maybe, I don't know, the smaller tanks, the Krios, that one looks a little bit too different in my opinion, probably to do this, but you never know. Maybe they're going to share some frames.
Yes. Very nice box. Very happy release that they did this. And I don't think anybody can really complain about the quality of what the models were getting. The one thing we really don't know is the price.
Yes, and there has been, I mean, the prices for the various battle forces have been relatively similar. There's been some differences, maybe, I don't know, 10 pounds here, 15 pounds there. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if we look at this in resin, I think you had told me that it was like around 400 pounds
Yeah.
is what you would pay for this in resin,
£406 for this if you buy everything in resin from Forgeworld.
which would probably indicate that this is going to be on the pricier side for the battle forces, right? Because there seems to be like a set percentage discount range that they kind of offer resin versus converting over to plastic. So I would assume that this is probably going to be more expensive.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if the Solar Auxiliary was £130. I wouldn't be surprised if this is at least £10 more, if not more than that. So 140 to £150 for this box. Still a massive saving from the resin. But then again, I don't think you can compare apples and oranges there between resin and plastic. Of course, it has to be cheaper. The question will really come down to how quickly GW wants to make a return on their investment into injection molding.
Yeah, this is very much true. What's interesting to me about this is essentially an allied contingent in a box. All you need to add is the HQ, right? You've got The tank is a heavy or dedicated transport. The thralls and the thalax are line troops, so you could actually run 2 units of 3 on the thalax and not take the thralls, or you could run the thralls and one big unit of thalax, and then the castellax, if I'm not mistaken, are an elite. So all you need to do is just drop in an HQ, and you've got like 800, 900 point allied detachment right here, which I think is better than what we saw with the Solar Aux, because that to me, that whole set just wasn't that useful as a dedicated allied detachment.
Yes, this set here, if you're running it as 2 units of 3 Thalax, and you're running it as a full 20-man Tech Thrall squad, is around 640 points, not including the HQ, which you'd have to add on there. So, very viable as a small contingent of allies. A bit too much to what? I think you could drop it down to 500 points if you wanted to by removing a bit here and there, at least three of the thralls, or just removing the armored transport there, and you'd have a 500 detachment. Increasing it up to 1,000, I don't think there's any HQs that can push it up another 400 points. You'd probably need to be using a second set to get this to 1,000 point allied detachment. But it's a good point. You don't have to use these guys as your main force. These would make a very interesting allied detachment.
And a very good one, actually, right? Because the thralls are super cheap. They do have line, but I think a unit of 10 of them is only like 45 points. And then if you bumped it up to the full 20, and why wouldn't you at that points cost?
It's
Um,
75 total, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it could just sit on a backfield objective and do thrall things. The Thalax have line as well, and they're very mobile. They have a decent stat line. They're not that easy to shoot off of things. This is to me, I mean, from if you're just looking at it from a competitive perspective, this isn't a bad little allied detachment for that reason. I mean, that's reasonably pointed, potentially 3 reasonably pointed line units and some decent firepower and mobility in the sense of the tank and the Thalax. Yeah, I mean, that to me is pretty nice.
Yeah, you've got my thinking hat on after talking about that, because if you're one of these people who likes to play a lot of your elite characters or elite squads and you're foregoing line troops, this is a very cheap way to add a lot of line and objective securing units. Not necessarily strong units when we talk about the thralls, but definitely the Thalax have some staying power there to just go and sit on an objective and hold it for the game whilst your Marines are doing the dirty work.
Absolutely. And it's going to be more durable than the Solar Aux allies would be, which is another way to get keep scoring into your list. But yeah, those Thalax have the durability to make them quite useful. Of course, the Thralls will just die to a stiff breeze. They only have like a 6-up save and toughness 3. They do have a 5-up feel no pain, but again, I mean, a lot of armaments are just going to bypass that, not allow them to take it because they'll be doubled out. But yes, this is definitely a good little scoring block if you wanted your main body Marine force to be more elite focused.
Yeah. You did mention a point earlier in the Heresy Thursday about the slow increase in pricing for these boxes as we've had the release of the Legion Astartes battle group, I think sometime last year, the Solar Auxilia battle group earlier this year, and now the Mechanicum battle group. They've all slowly had a price increase. And it's also correlated to a points decrease for what's actually in the boxes there.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Now we know that Games Workshop just announced a recent price increase, right? So part of this costing more than the previous Battle Force boxes is going to be tied into that. But I do also think, again, because of what the cost of this would have been in resin, that's also a factor in how they price it. And you're right, it is only 685 points. I think you said earlier versus the 750-ish of the
700
Solar Rock.
around, yeah, 700 there
Yeah,
if you fully
yeah,
kitted out.
yeah, and again, the Marine one, of course, was over 1,000 points because obviously more points expensive. Um, I don't know. I mean, again, I think if all these Battle Force boxes are in the same rough price range to me, you know, 5 pounds is 5 pounds, 10 pounds is 10 pounds, and I understand for some people that's a big deal. I get it. I totally get it. Um, but I mean, if they're all keeping in roughly the same range, to me it kind of makes sense. But you're right, the points are going down.
The one thing I would like to see, and I don't think it's ever going to happen, is that these battle groups are introductory sets like the battle forces for 40k. But the problem right now for the battle groups is they're in limited supply, first come, first serve, get them till they're gone style of things. And we've seen a discount. There's also, of course, a discount in these boxes. For the Astartes box set, the discount was about £60. For the Solar Auxilia, it was about £65 from their plastic separate releases here. I've got a feeling it'll be very much similar to that for the Mechanicum when they eventually release these all as individual units. But the thing is, for these other factions, there's no starter set like the Age of Darkness box. For if you didn't want to start the Legion Astartes guys as your first foray into 30k, you have no easy way of doing it unless you've managed to catch one of these at the right time.
I agree with you. I think in a perfect world, once we kind of have like the main releases done or those wave of releases done for 30k, in a perfect world, they would release something similar to the combat patrol boxes that they have in 40k, and that would be a way to build your force. I don't think we're getting there anytime soon based on the pace of releases and how many more things that they've hinted that they need to release. But you're right. I mean, if you miss out on one of these, whether it's the Solar Ox or the Mechanicum, it is going to be harder for you to build your box. The one thing I've noticed, however, that we've seen with all of the battle forces is people sell off the excess, right? So whether it was the Mark III box set or whether it was the Solar Ox, and probably with this one, some people aren't going to want the tank, or some people aren't going to want the thralls. They prefer to focus on big robots, whatever else. So that might be an option for you to kind of stretch your dollar a little bit more just in case you do miss out on it. But I personally think this box is probably going to sell out faster than the Solar Ox. Because let's face it, most people don't want to play Solar Ox that play 30k. It's a very horde army. It requires a lot of painting, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of interest in Mechanicum, and what has scared people off in the past is the price and the resin. And I think this one's going to be selling hot.
Yep, I can't disagree with you there. I've had a chat with a few Mechanicum players, and the one thing that they did point out is that I think for Mechanicum you're either Thrall heavy or Autonoma heavy here, and here you're getting a bit of both. So teaming up with your relevant counterpart who likes the other side of things allows you to potentially share a lot of these boxes, and I think you'll find these thralls will actually be going quite cheap because I think people do sway more towards automata in a Mechanicum army.
Yeah, it's a fair point. But again, there's lots of different ways to kind of maximize your budget, right? You could mix the thralls with excess zombies from Age of Sigmar, or a lot of people sell Cadians for really cheap. There's different ways, I think, Scutari. I think there's different ways to kind of mix and match to kind of stretch things. But again, we'll have to see the frames as well. And yeah, you're right. I mean, get together with a buddy. If one of you wants to go robot heavy and the other one doesn't, now's your chance.
Yeah. I was also looking here. The thralls only come with their las. It looks like, honestly, it looks like a small version of a las cannon, but I think it's supposed to be a las rifle of some sort there. But there's no other weapon options because I think there's other thrall units, right, with flamers and such.
The in 1.0 the thralls could take different weapons, and I need to look at my book right now about what options they have in 2.0 because I just haven't looked at this book that much. Let's take a quick look real quick. What other options? Okay, so those are called las locks, which was an option they had in 1.0, and they've removed any other weapon options here. So it looks like what you see is what you get.
Wow, so they're only a pretty one-dimensional unit. So Laslox, fair enough. 5+ feel no pain, hatred everything. It's not too bad. Hatred I think allows you to reroll, right? So that means they can reroll shots.
No, hatred's in combat.
In combat, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
With a
first round.
weapon skill of 2 and a ballistic skill of 2, I wouldn't be taking these guys into combat at all.
No, I would not either. Yeah, they're pretty poor initiative, 2 and 1 attack. No, I mean in 1.0, if I remember correctly, you could actually give them heavy chain swords, or you could give them something that made them, let's call it mediocre in close combat versus absolutely horrible. But again, you're not taking these guys because of their offensive output. Let's face it, whether it's the shooting or the hand to hand, you're taking them because they're cheap line, and that's it.
Yeah, I think you have other options in the Mechanicum for close combat, mainly the autonomo walking around. Kit them up in the close combat variants with some nice chain wheels. I think what are they called again? The saws there, those circular saws. Put some of those on your Castellax, and you've got some pretty nasty close combat units there. But as you may have seen if you were watching our latest battle report, the difference in weapon skill is a real big factor in close combat, as I remember from when my Contemptor could not do anything against one of your units from the Thousand Suns.
Yeah, but let's face it, that was like the only good unit in the Thousand Suns, with the exception of HQ. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, but Mechanicum have never been really a close combat type army. Now you can kit out the Magos, the HQ. You could always turn him into an absolute beast and very hard to kill in 1.0 and in 2.0. I mean, you can put the points in, you can do that. The Myrmidons can do a bit of work. Um, but again, that's not why you play Mechanicum. You typically play Mechanicum because they're really good at shooting, and 2.0 is not different. If anything, I think they've gotten a little bit worse in hand to hand, because the hand to hand equivalent of the Thalax was the Skillax. Nope, not the Skillax. What was they called? I can't remember all these names off the top of my head. Sorry, it's just been too long since I've been reading this book. But basically, they were Thalax with power fists or claws. They nuked those guys down. Ursarax, that's what it is.
Ursarax, yeah.
Yeah, they actually, I think, nerfed them a bit. So you don't have a lot of hand-to-hand options, with the exception of the Magos and some of the Myrmidons, really, in Mechanicum. But I wouldn't expect you to, honestly. It's a shooting army, a tanky shooting army.
Well, look, I think that's all for this week's Heresy Thursday, because that's really the only thing of note that's come out from the Horus Heresy. It's lovely to see that we are getting a rapid release of products for us, more so than some of the others, especially if you count Legion Imperialis as part of the Horus Heresy, because they've been getting a lot of releases if you've been keeping track. We have been keeping an eye on it, but we're going to be putting it on the back burner until we're really ready to bring you Legions Imperialis properly from Far East Wargaming here.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, for liking, subscribing, and all of that, and for keeping the comments coming. We really enjoy the interactions, and we really enjoy bringing this content to you. So yeah, stay in touch, and we will catch you on the next one.